Hello, my friends. Once again here to talk about fears. I want to share with you my thoughts and what discoveries I have made while I was going around and to deal with my fears. Let us start. What is fear? Fear, first of all, cannot be determined objectively, cannot be measured. You cannot say how much it weighs, how much is its length or breadth or height. Simply because it's a thing which is created in our thoughts, in our minds, and is very subjective. Someone who fears heights, for me, it's nothing. So, it's purely subjective and created in our minds. This is what fear is, really. And let us start with some facts. First of all, let's recognize the fact that fear really is the biggest limiter of all human progress. In all recorded history, fear is the biggest limiter of all human progress. It's what prevents us to make the next step, to read the next book, to learn a new skill, to develop new abilities. Fear is preventing us. From fear, really, everything else springs, like limiting thoughts, like our inner critic. Imagine that you have an octopus. The body of the octopus is fear. The tentacles is limiting beliefs, inner critic, and everything else. Eliminate fear, deal with fear, and you deal with the tentacles too. Okay. Number two, the mere fact that we are humans guarantees that we will all have fears, and we will always have fears. Don't ever think in your minds that because we have fears, you and me and everyone, we are the children of a lesser God. It doesn't apply, it's not true. It's an absolute lie. The biggest, the most successful people in the world, the most admiring people in the world, paragons, big businessmen, all have to deal with their fears. I remember I was hearing Robin Sharma admitting that his biggest fear was public speech. He studied law and practiced law for quite a few years until he rediscovered his real core values and went after a new career. And he admitted that he structured all his university curriculum around the fact that he didn't want to give any public speeches. So that's it. People like Richard Branson, they make a point in their lives every year to sit down with their mentors and their coaches to deal with their restrictions. Fortune 500 companies also make it a point each year to train their top executives about how they deal with their limiting beliefs and their restrictions. So don't ever think that we are the children of a lesser God. All humans have fears. This is because of two reasons, mainly. First of all, biologically, we are hardwired to fear. And secondly, we are all born and not grown on trees. I will elaborate a little bit on these two subjects. Not recent studies in biology of fear have shown that really we are hardwired for fear. Why? Mainly we have three parts in our brain. It's the reptilian brain, where all pure instincts lay, and is the first part of our brain that was evolved hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's the mammalian brain, which has a very important part of the brain, the amygdala. Amygdala is the storehouse of all our emotions. Also stores whatever negative or painful experiences we have in our lives. And amygdala connects to the endocrine glands, which produce all the fear hormones, like adrenaline, for example. And the third part of the brain, which was the last part of our brain which evolved, was the neocortex brain. In neocortex is where our intelligence lives. It doesn't react to instinct, and it weights situations. It's where our intelligent thinking is made. Okay, and actual studies have shown that there is always a window of 0.25 seconds before we react to any input of fear. So, By biology, by our biology, we are hardwired for fear. Let us go to the second part, which is very important. Okay, we are born and not grown on trees. The mere fact that we are born guarantees that deep into our subconscious we all have fears. Why? Because these fears were embedded to us deep into our subconscious by the persons who taught us how this world works. Parents, teachers, the whole society. What does a child do? He's imitating parents. Why he does that? To get the love and acceptance from parents. By imitating their behavior and their patterns, also buys their fears. Take, for example, a child of a father who was always afraid to take risks. There are big chances, I would say 99%, this child is also afraid to take risks. So, by the mere fact that we're born, we all have deep in our subconscious fears, which are given to us by our parents, our school teachers, the whole society. But we have to recognize those fears, because fears can be covered by success, for example. Let me give you an example. You walk into a room which is flooded with lights. Does it mean that darkness doesn't exist? Oh, be sure, darkness exists. As soon as you leave the room and you turn off the lights, there goes darkness. So fears always exist. In my case, for example, I was quite successful till about 2000. The mere fact that I was successful made me not able to recognize my fears. My fears were not in the open, were not in the surface. But as soon as I had my disaster, immediately the fears appeared. And the fact that I didn't recognize them as fears, and I will explain to you how this happened, made me do great mistakes. Let me put some light into that. I was born and my birth was very difficult. After my birth, it was doubtful if my mother and me would live. I was breathing normally, I had my eyes open, but I cried only about 8 to 10 hours after my birth. So I would think that from the very early stage of me coming into this life, the ability to go against what seemed to be inevitable was in my genes. Okay. On the other hand, my father was born and raised in a very difficult environment. It was Greece after the Second World War. At his age of 12, he had to work in a little factory fixing roof tiles, and he had to walk almost every day about 40 kilometers back and forth to school. It was a deprived environment in countryside of Greece, of course, and he was the first male child amongst a flock of girls. So by tradition he had put on his shoulders responsibilities and obligations which are not his, were not his. The mere fact of his environment, what resulted? It resulted in him being critical, being pessimistic, not being afraid of losing control. And how this applied to me. Okay, I was imitating his behavior. So I was critical, I was questioning, and of course I was a hard child by nature because of my birth. My father was facing a minor image of his in me. And you know this, how it happens. Sometimes we dislike people because we see things of ourselves in them which we don't like. And he didn't recognize this fact, of course. And of course, the clashing between me and my father was, as I grew up, was more often and often and often. But I was very hard-minded. What I wanted, I achieving and I was succeeding. So came my success. After my disaster, my economic disaster, all this criticism, of course, returned. Okay, in my head, of what happened in my earlier years and continued to be criticized by parents and father. I didn't recognize that, and this of course made me angry. But beware, behind every anger lies fear. Fear of what? Of criticism, fear of not being accepted, fear of maybe not being able to measure up to the circumstances. And I was angry at my father. It was like trying to make the horse move, and I was not beating the horse, but I was beating at the saddle. My focus was, and my anger was against my father. Okay, and what I did, because in my disaster a bank was involved, I went against the bank without any conscious thought, without any logical thought. I was after the bank with a vengeance. And I can say that I had the results I wanted. And actually a few months ago, we had a final deal with the bank and everything went fine. But this deal, if I had recognized my fears and my restrictions, I could have done 7, 8 years earlier than that and in better terms. So you understand how fear can be destructive and prohibit you to take the right steps in your life. Also be sure that always fear will exist. I don't like the word fear, okay? Because it describes more of the emotion that we get of something else. I would like to call it friendly enemy. Enemy because definitely it has to be dealt with, and friendly because it's like a neon post showing us where we need to grow. This is the direction which we have to take. It's not easy, but this is what we do, and this is what we are offering. We have a systematic way which we can go through and deal with our fears, with our friendly enemies. And don't think that because we are dealing now with a certain friendly enemy or fear, that we're not going to have any fears again in our lives. Be sure, the minute that we conquer one of our fears, the next fear will appear. A mountain top, what really is the bottom of the next mountain. And what happens to that? As we conquer these mountain tops all of the time, in all our lives, because this great game is life, we gain in self-confidence. Each time we conquer fear, we gain in self-confidence, in self-esteem. And immediately, our inner critics, our limiting thoughts evaporate. So, that's all, guys. This is what I wanted to share with you. And to make sure that you understand that we can offer help by our systematic and comprehensive way of dealing with our fears. Thanks a lot.